call them CCCs, the workers for the government. They were getting paid, and they all lived. And I don't know where it is because I wasn't familiar enough, except that when they got in trouble, then they'd be put in jail. And at that time, my uncle, Clyde Wells, was the sheriff. And I stayed with them. That's where I lived with them. And that's why I say nowadays, well, I lived in a jail, county jail for a year and a half. Well, I did, but I was incarcerated. But those kids, I feel sorry for them because they worked hard and for no money. I mean, I guess they probably got something.
Yeah, I think they had a certain amount, and then they were supposed to send a certain amount home.
Home, I think
help
so.
with the family.
But I never did know. You know, I never knew them that well. But they were. I said they were older. Maybe they weren't. Maybe I didn't need a job at that time. I mean, you know, we weren't. My dad was a railroader, and he made a little bit more money than some people did, and so I wouldn't have worked there probably if I didn't have a job.
So was Clyde Wells, that's Bonnie's.
That's Bonnie Wells's father.
Father, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a Marshall County Sheriff?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So then you lived up in that old jail area,
Sure.
that house.
Sure.
Oh, it got torn down.
Year and a half.
Yeah. Neat
Where the
old
new
house. New
city
courthouse.
office is.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I spent a lot of time in the courthouse. I was girl age at that time.
Girl.
So, well, the girls my age were in the offices. Everybody. There was probably, I don't know how many people being in there that had offices, but those kids were my age, and my wife was from Marysville, so she knew all of them. I wasn't married. I don't mean like that, but then at that time I knew them all. So I spent a good lot of time over there in the courthouse with those bells. And the main thing I remember was, well, I was probably, I was 18. I think I was 19 years old then, because I left there and went to service. So I tell you, you're talking about Clyde Wells. I thought it was funny. We all slept upstairs, and there was a railing up the stairway right in the middle of that. There was a railing past it, and built in. It was all built in, but spacious. I don't know how to explain it. But I remember one night that the phone rang in the middle of the night, and there was no phones in the rooms in those days like there are now. The phone, only one phone that I know of, was out in the hall, and just around outside their door. Phone rang, and he was different. I wake up when the phone rings. We all did, like at that. But anyway, he hurried out there as fast as he could, and when he hit the slick floor outside the bedroom, his feet flew out, and then he scooted clear over till his feet were in the railing of that banister. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And he jumped up from there, and there's where I heard some of my words I never probably heard before. In the middle of the night, he swore, and he was so mad, and he went over there to that telephone, grabbed it off the wall, and he says, "Hello." And all my life, that's one of the things we tell, our stories, when our families get together, when he says, "Hello." So, and there were a lot of things like similar, different. The only story I have about Eagle Eye is, it was after I had the mail carrying job, but I hadn't taken over yet. I worked for Vic Stanley for 6 months. And I knew who Eagle Eye was, but that's about all. And so he stopped me one time and told me, he said he was kind of hungry and wanted to know if I had any money. And I gave him $1. No, I said, sure. And from then on, I think every time, I never met him, but what he, asked me for money, and he wasn't hungry. He went right to Sam's and spent my $1. And I've had people with me when this happened say, "Why would you do that? Why would you do that?" And I said, "Well, I'm not, thank God, I'm not in his position. And he needs it worse than I do, I think. I mean, I didn't need the money that bad, of course. Wasn't, you don't give it away ordinarily, but he was one of the persons that I did, and I shouldn't have, because I was probably helping him make him that much worse, I suppose. I don't know. But that's all I know. Well, I do know that Eagle Eye was, and the older people would probably remember it, but there were probably 5 or 6 older men in Blue Rapids that never worked, and maybe they'd had jobs, and I don't know where they got their money, but they were drunk, I bet, every 2 or 3 weeks, and maybe more often. They all would play cards for a while, and pretty soon they'd decide, I guess, that they needed something to drink, so they got drunk. And I do remember, but that's one thing that I won't mention, that who there's none of them are alive, but their families are. And so well, you got that shot.
Anyway, now you want my name first? Well, my name's Marjorie Carter, and my parents were Charlie and Gladys Cummings Miller. And I was born on May the 14th, 1922. And I was on a farm about 5 miles east of Blue Rapids on number 9. And then we got to the Nets Corner, we called it. We turned north for a mile. And then on the corner was where my grandparents lived. And then another mile west is where I was born and raised, and I lived there until I was married. So, and it was at the end of the road, believe you me. It was a dead end. And so that's why, my grandparents, George Miller, he raised Hereford cattle, and he was known all over the country for his brand of cattle and how good they were and everything. And then in later years, he built a new house just about a block west. Well, where they lived, Chuck Hula lived there for quite a while. I don't know whether somebody might know that. But anyway, then my grandfather built a house about a block from the old homestead. And they lived there. My grandmother died, and then my aunt took care of him, lived with him. And then when he died, they moved to Blue Rapids. Leonard and Angeline Bigham bought the house and moved the house down to their farm. Angeline lived there until she died. So, but I was glad they got it because it was a nice house. I went to the Pleasant Valley grade school, or to the District 49 from 1928 until 1936. And my first grade teacher was Vida Fincham, who is Jim Wilson's mother, or who was Jim Wilson's mother. She married his dad then after that. And I do have my 5th and 6th grade teacher is still living. And she came from between Blue Rapids and Frankfort, the Howells, Lyle Howell, his sister, Madeline. And she was my 5th and grade, and she lives in Chapman now. She's in her 90s and just as chirp as anything, better than I am, really. And actually, being out there in the country, I never came to town much. My dad and mother ran a dairy. They had Jersey cattle, and they ran a dairy, and they sold milk. We bottled milk. Every morning before our breakfast, we had to bottle milk and then put those caps on. And before we even had breakfast, we had to do that. And then my dad would take to town, and he delivered all over town. But, on rare occasions, I would go with him. I delivered until I got bit by a dog, and I didn't do it too much after that. But anyway, while we lived out there, I know the society or someone has been interested in the Whiteway Country Club. You see, the highway that our schoolhouse was on was the Whiteway, called the Whiteway Road, the highway. number 9, but it was called White Way. So they organized the club in 1922, and my mother was a charter member of that. And I am the only living member, the original members. We have 2 others still living, but they joined later. Gladys Cornell and Bernice Valesky. They joined later, but Angeline and I were the last 2, and now Angeline's gone. So my memories of the Depression, they were very vague because I wasn't very old, actually. And our life went on. We had plenty to eat because we were on the farm, and chickens, eggs, milk, we had always had plenty to eat. I never heard my folks complain. I was just not aware of it, really. We just were all happy, and that was the way it went. But I do remember the drought, when it was so dry and so hot. It was over 100 every day, and never got below 90 at nights. And I know we lived in kind of an old farmhouse without electricity, and we slept upstairs, but we didn't during that time because my dad made fixed cots outside, and we slept outside, which the beds were just as hot as anything because they, you couldn't keep them out of the sun. And
So what year, that would have been what year?
Oh dear.
When they had the drought?
I really don't know. That's what I say. My dates,
Yeah, okay.
They're all intermingled, and I'm sure I was going to school.
What now?
The drought that we had that was so bad. Well, it's kind of connected with the dust storms because
It
then
was in the
we had,
30s then.
yes, we had,
36,
we had the
37.
dust storms.
Yeah.
Because I can well remember the one really bad one we had. It got so bad that the kids couldn't see the teacher up in front of the room. And so our parents all came after us and took us home about, just a little bit after noon. And, but that's the one really bad one I can remember. But, I can remember we'd have wet cloths, to wash, kind of hold over our face so we wouldn't breathe that dust because it got so thick and so bad. And, but to my knowledge, of course, my dad was a farmer. He farmed along with his brother and granddad when he was able. And so like I say, we did farm work. He did. I had my jobs on the farm, and we were happy and contented that way. I'll tell you a story about we had our beds outside, and of course we were all scared to death of snakes and living way out in the country, and we saw them quite a bit. But anyway, my dad heard somewhere that if you take a rope and put it all around your bed, why then the snakes won't bother you. Well, we never had a snake, so I don't know, and he did that, so we don't know whether it was the
I've never
rope
heard that.
or just that there weren't any snakes. They were probably too hot anyway. Like I say, I didn't go to town very much, but Saturday nights, that was the night that all of the farmers came to town, that in the summertime. In the wintertime, we didn't. We just, we didn't come to town like that. It was too cold. But we would try to be one of the very first people there so we could park our car over here on the west side of the square. The west side and the north side over here is where most of the businesses were, the drugstores and the grocery stores. And over in here, it was kind of dark. I mean, there were businesses along, but it was darker. And I know a bunch of us girls that from out there and around that I knew, we'd go and we'd walk around the streets at night, And my mother seldom got out of the car, but she would visit with everybody because everybody came to town and did their trading, which they would trade eggs or cream for their groceries. So, and to this day, we still call it. We're going to go do trading. It's just we don't trade anything now but money, but for our groceries. But anyway, we'd. And usually I was lucky if I got a dime that my dad could spare, and I'd go to Ed Neesda's drugstore and get a cherry Coke, which I don't like Coke now, but I did then. And we were satisfied. We had a dime.
Now, did he have a soda fountain or and the stools?
Yeah, he had
Okay.
stools, and then he also had tables
Okay.
too, and we could sit at the table if we wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And and Floyd Sorick, he had the drugstore on the corner. And he'd always save my dad the Chicago Herald newspaper every Saturday so my dad could pick it up when we'd come to do our trading. And my people would stay till all hours of the night, and visit, and because that's about the only time a lot of us saw our neighbors. And so it was real interesting. There at one time, I think we must have had 4 or 5 grocery stores, because I know, Marky Brooks had one, and Orange Short had one. Peterson's, what was his first name? Peterson's had one.
Where was it located? Peterson's.
Peterson's, I think, was over here where the Blue Valley is now.
Okay. And
At
then
one time.
Okay.
At one time, yes.
Okay.
They were over there. Orange Short was over here on the corner, where
Okay.
it's kind of empty now, I guess.
East of where Ray Haas.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, right
Okay.
there, yeah. And
And then
of
there
course,
would've
Markey was over on the north side of the street there for a while, the square. Then he moved over into the one where your dad bought from him,
Sutherland's.
over there,
Okay.
So he actually had 2. Then when Markey sold his to Roy, he went over on the block there where the grocery store is now, and he had a slaughterhouse, and he also made bologna that people all over the country came to buy his bologna because it was good. And
What year would that have been, approximately?
well, he was in that when we were married in 41.
Okay.
I married Marky's son, Dennis, in 1941.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
and he was still in that when we were married, so. Or he was, or what, do you know when?
My dad bought the store in 49.
49, okay, well,
Uh-huh.
it was after that then,
Uh-huh.
because Marky went over there then and did that
Yeah.
after that.
I think there was a Browns, red and white over on the
Yes,
south
there
side.
was, I think over to, was it over here by where Gamble's went, Gamble's went in, and now it's the VFW. Yeah, you're right.
Vic's old store.
Yeah, and then Vic's was around the corner, but Vic's, I think, was a little later maybe. I
Vic's-
don't remember.
Vic's and Brown's in the same place exactly.
Yeah, right. So anyway, I was trying to think, I had several of my family that, now, my uncle, Ray Aarons, ran the filling station, the standard station that was there, they tore down to build the post office. And he ran that. And Earl Brooks, he was my brother-in-law, he and his wife had a little ice cream shop over here on the west side of the square. And it was just a little place. I was going to high school then because I worked there in the evenings for a while. And then they moved over here to the little store just south of the pool hall now, that store. They were in there for a while.
Exactly, where were they on the west side?
It's so vague. I wish I had a picture of, where the buildings actually
Now,
sit.
which one you want to know about? Which?
Where Earl had his ice cream.
Well,
And it's
over on
where
the west side.
okay, they used to have the chick boys come to town, to the
By
fair.
Marky's.
Yeah, it'd be south of where Marky's was. It was
on the
in
west
there
side of the
somewhere.
square.
And
No,
anyway,
real.
chick boys players used to come to Blue Rapids. They had a tent show, and they would put that on. Well, there was one guy that came, and neither Orville nor I could remember his name, but he liked Blue Rapids so well that he opened a little hamburger shop there in where Earl had his ice cream shop, and that was in later years. See, I don't remember the years. Things are just kind of. Also, my great uncle had a little hamburger joint, we called it in those days, a hamburger joint, right on the corner where the grocery store sits now. And it was just a little building. He just had stools, but it was quite a popular place.
What was the name of it?
You know, I don't know what, it was my Uncle Clyde Whitebread that ran it, that
Whitebread,
owned
okay,
it, Whitebread,
okay,
uh-huh.
okay.
And anyway, then Judd Linscott bought it from him. But the high school kids, that was
We have a picture of Judd's shop, and we couldn't figure out where it was.
well, he bought the little hamburger joint, we called it,
Yeah.
all of us kids, because it was a real popular place for all the high school kids to, after school, they'd come in and he sold drinks and he sold, soda and hamburgers or something like that. And so it was quite a, quite a hangout. I went to of course, in 19, let's see, it would be 36. I came to Blue Rapids, and I graduated from Blue Rapids High School. And in 1940, and then I married Dennis Brooks in 1941. And then our twins were born in 1940, June the 23rd, 1943. Dennis went to the Army on the 25th. And I was left with two little babies. And so I went out then and stayed with my parents, which had moved southeast of Blue Rapids on the Hoyt place. And so I stayed there until Dennis, and then Dennis got out in August of 43 with an honorable discharge. He was injured while in training, and they just didn't need him, I guess, that bad. He was training to be what do they call him, a gunner. It was the Air Force, Army Air Force, actually, and he was training to be a gunner, on a belly gunner. What did they call him? Do you know?
Probably Bill, it had to be if it was that, they were not, 17, B-17.
Yeah, well, that's what he was going to be. I mean,
That's
that's
the only
what they
one
were
that had
training him for.
underneath belly.
Okay, Guinness.
August of 43, yes. And of course, we stayed with my parents out there until we found a place to live. And our first place was where Elmbergs live now. We lived up there for a couple of years. And then we've just moved all over since then. But I can remember, you ask about Blue Rapids. I can remember Frank Marvin's store because we always bought our Buster Brown shoes there. That was where we bought our Buster Brown shoes. And different places I can remember, but I was just a girl, and I just didn't, till I did start to high school. Then, of course, I was more familiar with the town and everything. My aunt, Mrs. Vern Miller, Helen Miller, she ran what they called in those days a heap-em-up shop. Over here, she sold ice cream. Do you remember that?
Well, I heard the story.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, okay.
And she sold this heap-em-up ice cream. She made her own, and it was right across there from the Regent
Shipped
Theater.
in.
And Helen ran it there, and then she moved over to one of the buildings along there where the grocery store is now, along in that block of stores. She had a little ice cream shop there for a while too.
Would it have been east of the Opera House or the show? In
Right
that
across the
corner?
street.
Well,
Well, it looks like a filling station now.
yeah,
But,
I think that was what it was originally intended for, wasn't it?
I think so.
okay.
It was always
But it
shaped
wasn't a
like
filling
that,
station
but
at that
that's where
time.
she ran her.
But now let me tell you, I don't think she made her ice cream when they had the heap 'em up. That was a company that had the heap 'em up ice cream.
Well,
And
anyway, it was good ice cream.
It
and
was,
She had a.
but they had all kinds of flavors, and I don't think
yes,
she could have done
Oh,
that.
it was delicious
It
ice
was-
cream, and she
It was
really.
heaping up.
And but it
Cheap
got a little
and-
bit too much for her to keep it up, so she gave that up. And so I guess I just had family all over town had something or other, that I can remember. And
Here's a Guyman Brooks shop that's still standing. That's on
Gaiman.
Gaiman. Okay,
Gaiman,
Gaiman.
yes.
Now, is that a?
Now, yes,
that-
he was. Let's see, was it Frank Brooks' son? I think it was Frank Brooks, and Marky raised him.
I see that.
Mm-hmm.
I think I know. I know where it is.
Uh-huh.
Well, I
Yeah,
do-
that's who it is,
Got
Gaymond.
it.
Uh-huh.
He
And Loretta Ann Petter is his daughter.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Loretta Ann is Gaymond's daughter.
okay. And this was like a blacksmith shop?
Yes, it was a blacksmith shop.
Okay.
What did he do? You
He was
I
a
don't-
blacksmith.
It was a blacksmith, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think he had anything else
Just a
going.
blacksmith shop.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Chicken feed or something, maybe?
He could have,
Sold
I
feed.
I
don't
don't remember.
remember.
I don't think so, but could be.
Wax something there.
But now, is this
That says
building still
welcome
standing?
there.
Is it really?
No, welcome,
South Main?
this says welcome and this says blacksmith.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah, I remember now. It is.
yeah, that was Gaymond's.
Okay.
And
And then what did your husband do here in town?
he cut, well, after he got out of the
I'll take a
service,
look
he
at
cut
that
meat
tip
for his
for you.
dad there in the grocery store for a while. And then I don't know, he might have worked for Roy for a while. But then after he worked, he carried mail for a while around town. And he worked for Vic. He cut meat mostly, that was his job. And then we got a chance to leave and go to Oakley, Kansas. One of the salesmen knew of a position in Oakley that was open for a meat cutter in a big store there, IGA store. So we picked up in 1957 and moved to Oakley, Kansas. And we lived there then until '63 when he got another job in Lindsborg. And we lived there then until, well, he passed away in 1968. And then I lived in Lindsborg then until I met Orville and got married and moved back to Blue Rapids. And then after we were married, then in a couple, 3 years, we moved to Leonardville for 25 years. Now we're back in Blue Rapids, and I've made the full cycle, and I think I'm home now. I'm back home.
When would have he been the baseball coach then?
Okay,
that
that would have
would have
been, oh, let's see, Lyle must have been what? Lyle was born in '51.
Okay, good.
And he was about, what, 2 or 3 years old, would it have been then? 53 or 54. It was a couple